Welcome to The Big Break Show, a podcast where we discuss short-term rentals, entrepreneurship, life, mindset, and everything in between. Here are your hosts, Rafa and Jesse Vasquez.
What's up, everybody? We're back with your favorite show, The Big Break Show, and I am here with Mr. Jesse Vasquez. What's up, brother?
What's up, man? Thank you for having me on the show today. Rafa's doing his little intro. I'm like, thank you for having me on. I feel like I'm a guest right now. What the hell's going on,
having
dude?
Me on the show. hey, bro. Thanks for having me back again this week on the show.
Thanks, Rafa, for allowing me to grace my presence on the Big Break Show. You're so amazing. Actually, you know what, man? Today, episode 69, Rafa's favorite number, by the way. We have a special guest, Alvin Uy, who is somebody that I met with Rafa about a year ago, and Rafa's been connected to him for quite some time. And you guys, when I met him, I really had the sense of like, whatever this guy's doing, I want to learn from it. And literally, he talked about like GoBundance, which I've joined over the beginning of this year. He's part of it. And he just shares so much insightful mindset, business, real estate, pivoting knowledge that I think, first off, you guys need to listen all the way to the end because it's that good. And this is the reason why we have these podcasts, is because these little tiny conversations that are subtle that just will open your eyes to a different perspective. Rafa, what's your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, it was really good because it's funny how, man, it just, you have the right conversations at the right time in life sometimes, right? And this happened to be one of them. Like you start kind of getting derailed or you start doing different things, and then you have one good conversation that kind of puts things into perspective again. And this was one of them. It was really, really well done. The conversation, I think, not well done, but the way it played out was great. Yeah. He talks a lot about overcoming some serious trauma and then becoming just the person he is today, who is a very successful investor, right? I met Alvin. I had a regular networking meetup. I had no idea who he was, and then we started getting to know each other. Now we work together. I co-host some of his properties. The only dude I'll co-host for. Co-host for anybody else. Yeah. And man, am I glad he came on. I've been trying to get him on the show forever, but he wasn't comfortable. Now he's getting, I love seeing it and talking to him because his growth mindset's great. He's just always constantly looking to grow. And he talks about that a lot here. And the fact that he came on this episode tells me that he's grown a lot because he was always never wanting to be public or on social media, anything like that. And he came on and he talked about it. I think this is going to be a really good one that everybody's going to enjoy. I mean, I sure did. I stayed quiet most of the time because he was just talking, firing off just great information and great life stories and great advice, more than anything else. Great advice. So, yeah,
it was a really good episode. I think this is going to be one that's definitely share it with somebody that you like, know, and care about. I think this is going to be one of those episodes that people are going to share because, again, there's a lot of positive stuff. This is one of these great mindset episodes that like you're just going to love and listen to and pick up something that's going to resonate with you, and you're going to be like, man, I can probably do that, or I can apply that to my life. So, yeah, for sure. Without further ado, Mr. Alvin Uy.
Hey guys, Rafa here. A lot of you guys have been asking me if I have a course, if I teach, if I mentor my short-term rental business, and the answer is I do actually. I just recently released my very first course. It has about 120 videos. If you're part of the monthly membership, we are adding 2 new videos a month in current issues or projects that I'm working on within the short-term rental business, and we do 1 monthly call live where you have access to me to ask me all the questions you want. So if you're interested in joining the course or if you want any more info, click the link below. It is application only. We only open it to a certain amount of students every month because we want people who are serious, who really want to be a part of this, who actually want to take their short-term rental business and grow it, or are starting from scratch and want to learn how to actually acquire properties doing rental arbitrage. If that's you, if you're serious and you really want to do this, click the link below, schedule a call with me or my team, and we'll get you going. Now back to the show.
Alvin, I'm super excited to have you on here today. You're one of the people that I met in Southern California with Rafa, probably about Rafa, a year ago? And I was really blown away by your story. And I think at that time, you didn't really share your story with a lot of people. So I'm excited to have you here today. And actually, in those short conversations with you, I actually joined GoBundance. Just you've been a GoBundance member for a long time. And, just being around you for the short amount of time, hearing you speak, and then my mentors, Aaron West and Daniel Del Rio, 2 guys that you're connected to, it was kind of a small world conversation when, I'm from this little place up north and you're obviously down in Orange County. Yeah, man, do you want to introduce yourself to everybody real quick? I'm excited to have you on here and to kind of talk about your journey through real estate and just in general. So go ahead and introduce yourself. Who are you, Alvin?
Yeah, so So I'm Alvin Uy. I am from Los Angeles, California. I just turned 50, guys. So believe it or not.
Well,
um,
you look younger than Rafa and myself. So whatever you're doing right now, hopefully you're not drinking baby's blood or anything. You're over in
hey,
LA.
listen, man. I'm actually on this challenge right now of no drinking for 2023, but I kind of failed it miserably during the Israel trip I was just on.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but anyway, so going back to who I am, so I'm an immigrant. So I came here when I was 12. My parents brought us here. I'm one of five kids. Come from a fairly wealthy family in the Philippines. However, my dad decided to change directions and wanted to bring us here, despite my grandparents' blessings. So they were cut off when we came here, and I had no clue that we were staying here forever. Really, the long story short is that my family got into some politics over there, and there's just threats of like kidnapping and all that stuff. So my parents kind
Wow.
of got really scared, and they're like, you know what, let's just go, let's just do this now. And they woke us up in the middle of the night. They're like, hey guys, we're going to Disneyland. Pack your things. When you're 12, what do?
Pack
You
your
you
things.
know yeah, you pack your things and you celebrate, right? Like, we're leaving right now. So we got to LA. My parents brought a lot of money at the time, and I didn't know how much, but I think it's probably equivalent to about 500K now. But
Wow.
they spent that rapidly because they got to the US. They were they didn't have any job history, no work history, no credit. And you guys know how important credit is here. And so they just bought everything cash. They, for us to get around, they bought a car cash. And so next thing you know, like a few months later, after doing all the Disneyland trips and everything else we can do, um, they quickly ran out of money. And so, long story short, ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in middle of Los Angeles, where it's pretty ghetto, pretty great ghetto even to this day.
Skid Row.
Um, not quite that, but it was pretty
Yeah.
rough.
Yeah.
It's still pretty rough. If you guys are familiar with like East Hollywood,
Yeah.
which is basically like by Normandy, Virgil, and Santa Monica area. It's still kind of gentrifying, but I grew up in that area, about 12 to about
East LA, right, Alvin?
uh, it more
Is it
like
not
East
East LA?
Hollywood.
East Hollywood.
East
Got it.
Hollywood, yeah, East Hollywood. So that's kind of like my childhood over there. Got bullied around. This immigrant kid who raised his hands when I go to classes, and I got beat up for it.
Yeah.
I was a smart guy trying to be like, oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't be too smart here. So yeah. So, and then we got into martial arts early on because of that, kind of the whole Karate Kid story. Like our neighbor said, hey, I'm going to teach you guys martial arts for it, bring you to a school. And so we started doing that and got into Taekwondo, and kind of spent the rest of my high school kind of moving to that path. And I was ranking pretty quickly, and next thing you know, I was qualified for the Olympics. And so I
Wow.
actually was training for the Olympics, but decided to drop that probably in the beginning of my senior year, just because of things kind of just happened with us, with a teacher and things like that. I decided just, you know what, this is not the right path for me. And that's about the time, like, I'm going to be vulnerable here. So this is the first time I'm being public about this, but
Yeah.
so my teacher that was training me for Olympics kind of at the time said that, we're going to train you this and this and that. But I didn't realize that there was something that I had to do, which is, he basically ended up sexually abusing me. And
Wow.
so I decided then, like, you know what, this is not the right path for me. And because my brothers were also in that system, and I'm like, you know what, if this can't happen to my brothers, so I decided to just kind of drop everything there. And so quickly decided, man, this is the path that I wanted to do, was like at the time, my goal was to open up a martial arts school. That was like my vision for my future. And that quickly just dissipated. I had to basically pivot from there. And so going through high school, I just didn't realize, like, what do I do now? And I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go to college, try to go to college. Went to school in Cal Poly Pomona for aerospace engineering. I was doing really well until 3 years. I'm like, man, I can't really see myself doing this. So I decided to drop out to pursue what I thought I wanted to pursue, art, because I've always been artistic. Decided then, okay, let me do this. My parents were pissed, obviously. Yeah, they were pissed because, you're Filipino, like, you gotta be a nurse at the very least, so I decided to go to art school. I didn't even really know what that was at the time. It's just that at the time I dropped out, and I was doing delivery, messenger service delivery. And I met this one guy. I was delivering package to Disney, and he's like, I see him drawing the computer every day, and I'm like, man, that looks like fun. That's what I want to do. I want to do that. And he's like, and one day I bummed a cigarette from him. I said, hey, what are you doing? How much do you make? He's like, oh, I make about $65,000 a year. Wow, that's great. Did you go to school? He goes, no. I'm like, holy crap. You didn't go to school? You're making $65,000 a year? I want that job. So I decided to pursue that. And so I went to Art Center for a little bit, realized that I couldn't qualify because I didn't have a portfolio. So it took me a few months to rebuild that, and finally I got in. And then just to find out I couldn't afford the school. So I dropped out again, but then I went to a trade school, just kind of trying to figure out how to afford that. And eventually I did really well there. I got job placement at some design agency, and eventually ended up, going up the ranks there. And I realized this is what I wanted to do, was, build a business around this. And so, and also that's about the time I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. And this is where whole real estate comes into play. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad. This is about year 2000. And when I read Rich Dad Poor Dad, man, that kind of changed everything for me. All of a sudden I had clarity. Okay, I want to be an investor. That's it. I got to be on that quadrant. And so I decided to plan my life around that. And I knew, like, my ticket there, because I knew, like, I just didn't have any money. How do I buy real estate, right? And so I decided, okay, my path is I got to start building businesses. And so from there, I met someone, or I applied at this one company who was the top 5 design agency in Los Angeles at the time. And he was an Asian guy. So I'm like, dude, this is a perfect model for me. So I applied, got an interview with the boss, the owner. And I told him, hey, look, please remember me, because one day I'm going to be running this company. And I think maybe that's why he hired me, man, because he just liked my confidence, I guess. And so he hired me. Next thing you know, it's true. Like 9 years later, I was running the company.
Wow.
And so that's about the time, like, he said, hey, Alvin, I'm going to retire. Why don't you take over? I go, great. And I didn't realize then he was trying to sell me the company. I didn't have any money to buy it. Yeah. And, I didn't know what I was doing. So I'm like, I don't know. I think if you're going to leave, I might just leave too. And so I declined the offer. And 3 months later, because I made a mistake maybe not a mistake. Maybe that's a blessing in disguise. But we had lunch, and I told him, look, if you're going to leave, I want to leave too. Why don't you lay me off and give me some severance? Right? Of course, this is like after a bottle of scotch that we drank. Yeah. So I didn't know what I was saying at the time. But man, the next day I was like, holy crap, what did I just do? I was hoping that he wouldn't remember. But 3 months later, I got laid off. And I was freaking out. And I told some of my friends and some of the clients, say, hey guys, I'm leaving. I just got laid off. I need work. And some of them said, okay, perfect. We'll give you some work. Little did they know I was actually looking for an actual job, but then they started giving me work, like actual projects. I'm like, okay, here you go. I guess now I'm starting my own business. So it went really quickly from there.
Are the projects like in the same line of business that you were in, or are this completely different projects?
I had a non-compete. So when I was designing for the agency before, it was more for theatrical, like movies, home videos, billboards. So I used to design all those things. So I worked on Harry Potter and all that stuff, and
Cool.
a lot of the big A titles. But when I started my own design agency, I got into consumer products just so it's a little different.
Gotcha.
So I got into that, and that leads me to I started designing for like toy companies, and that's about the time I started having kids. So I'm like, you know what? Let me see if I can really like focus on this stuff, and I realized then like, okay, I think I want to start building my own products, developing my own products, and that's about the time I started another company called Soap Socks. It's we designed and developed this washcloth for kids. It's a toy product. That's the one I was featured on Shark Tank for.
Yeah.
So I was on Shark Tank for that, where we got an offer. They wanted to buy us out for $1 million, and we walked away from it. And the company just kind of blew up from there. So I still have that company, although I'm not day to day anymore because I have my other partner running the show now. 2019 is when I decided, let's to myself, like, I'm kind of tired of this business. I kind of want to shift gears. And then 2020 happened, and you guys know COVID happened. And so my whole design business kind of shut down a little bit because it's all entertainment based, and everything just shut down here in LA. So that was a wake up call. Made me realize, like, one day I'm going to really focus on real estate. That one day came sooner than expected, or at least I realized, like, holy crap, this one day is now. And just about that time, I've been building my portfolio on the side anyway. So in conjunction to me building my agency, I was actually flipping houses and building my rental portfolio here in LA, just so I can offset my income. Mm-hmm. So those are things that I started doing aside. So I had multiple sort of, I knew then, like, diversifying my investments and planting seeds here and there will only work to my benefit later on. So by 2020, I realized, wow, it's time to harvest. And so by 2020, I decided to just pivot 100% to real estate and close down my design agency, because I essentially lost about 80% of my clientele anyway. It's like starting all over. I just didn't have the what's the right word? The drive or the heart to even pursue that anymore. I was burnt out. And real estate got me excited, and I'm like, wow, okay, what am I looking for here? And I discovered ADUs, which is the new thing. And so I'm looking at this as like a new challenge. To me, it's a product, and I'm a product developer by trade. So it's like, man, this is a perfect thing. It's a combination of business, combination of product development, and it's real estate, and I can really make a difference here. So, that's about the time I was all in on it. Now we got a construction company, scaling the operations, probably going to be building a fund pretty shortly, scaling Airbnbs along with that. Rafa is one of my partners. So he's doing an incredible job just kind of co-hosting with me. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. So that brings us back to where we are now. So I don't know if that tells my story.
Yeah,
probably a little longer winded than I wanted to hope for, but hope that kind of brings everything to close.
There's a lot of things. First off, I want to start off by saying I told somebody in a meeting when I went to a job interview that I wanted to run their company. They told me to get the hell out of the room when I said that. So for your boss to be like, all right, cool, like, I'm going to hire this guy. Literally, the guy, I'm not kidding you, I went to this job interview. It was for it was a copywriter. This was like in the early 2000s. And I said, the guy's like, what do you expect to be doing in this company? I was like, I want to be doing, I'm going to have your job. Let me see your job. He's like, get out of here. Like, literally told me to get out of there. I was like 19 years old. So kudos to you. And the second thing I want to talk to you about is I commend you right now for being extremely vulnerable in a space that's something you haven't talked about before. I think that there's a lot of stigmas around that, especially as being a man, to come out and say that you had something like that happen to you. So Alvin, I want to give you kudos for that, like for actually being able to speak about this stuff. And I think that, this is me again, talking from the outside. Did that situation shift? Did you tell anybody anything, or did you kind of like internalize that for a long time in your life? Like how did that?
So let me clarify the thought here. I haven't made that decision to go public until this year. As you know, I joined GoBundance last 2 years now.
Right.
So this has been a secret for a long time. In fact, not all my brothers even know yet. It's something that I kind of just kept, and it after having all these sort of deep work on myself, I realized that there's a lot of things that's holding me back, and a lot of it was because ever since that experience, I've always been sort of self-reliant. Ever since then, like I didn't trust anybody.
Yeah.
I wanted to pursue everything by myself, like it's all DIY. And in order for me to grow, I really needed to expand everything. And part of that is my healing process to make sure now I could let go of that past. But it's also, I realized it's also a blessing because it brought me to really focus on doing the impossible all by myself.
Yeah.
And the one thing I learned from that is I never wanted to outsource my fears. That's one big thing that that had gifted me. So I'm looking at it as a gift. And so there's a lot of people out there who may have these secrets or may have these traumas. And I want to be able to say, look, with every trauma, there's a treasure. So there's always purpose in every pain. So I decided to use that to fuel me instead of destroy me.
Yeah.
And one of the Gobos said, you know what, maybe you just got to be more public about this, because there are a lot more people out there who you can actually
reach,
encourage, and also maybe inspire. So that's what I've been doing.
Yeah. I think that's it's something that a lot of people don't speak about. And when they do, there's a lot of people that are in the same situation that you are. I mean, and collectively, I think it's harder for a male to come out to talk about these things. And I could be wrong. This is me just like generalizing the situation, but it's hard to talk about that in general, but normally you don't hear men talk about that kind of stuff. And I think for you, like Alvin, getting to know you and just the short amount of time that I spent with you, like you kind of shaped the way I think about things just from your story and stuff like that. So for me, man, to hear you talk about this stuff, like it's an incredible story of coming here with, literally nothing, right? Your parents had 500 grand, which is pretty decent, but then they went through it and you kind of learned how to do stuff. Not only that, but then dealing with the people that gave you crap in school, and hopefully you kicked some other asses when you got into jujitsu and all that stuff. We'll have to talk about your tally numbers and how many faces you punched, but also to be able to, to be able to come out of this on the other side, because there's a lot of people, and the reason why I want to bring this up is because a lot of people can look at this and stay in the negative, like their entire lives. And for somebody like you that's able to kind of to self-reflect and grow, and you're 50, even though you look 30, like this is like your time in your life, or maybe this is that moment where you're just like, you know what, I need to it's another chapter in your life. And you're flipping the pages. And I think that's really cool that you're able to talk about this stuff now. And not only that, but being part of Go Abundance, it's a group of men that collectively do things together, whether that's, family, personal, business. And to be able to have those conversations with these guys, I think that's going to be a really uplifting moment, not only for you, but for a lot of the people in there. Because I guarantee there's people that are suffering in silence in a lot of these things. So, man, that's amazing that you're being able to, have the courage to talk about this stuff here.
I mean, quite honestly, look, we all need some feedback from other people, right? And you guys are trying to build a community on your own. I know you guys are trying to launch a mastermind, or you already have a mastermind, but I think those are very important, especially today. I mean, being part of Go Abundance had really man, I got to tell you, it changed my life. It changed every perspective of my life. I'm now a better person. I have much more clarity. Everything for me is very, very, very defined, and everything is intentional and purposeful. And I was kind of traveling that path, but I was a little lost. I was kind of just, didn't have much guidance. But now it's like, it's really, really important, especially in today's age, especially now. Like there's so much noise, so much clutter that, even, you said something about us man can't really do that, but we can.
Yeah.
I think that's a limiting belief. The culture is changing for us.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
one thing I've learned from my experience is that it taught me how to pivot. Having that trauma, instead of failing, instead of just kind of regressing, I decided I'm going to pivot. And that's one thing throughout my life that I've always challenged myself, is to constantly pivot. I think being able to pivot, being able to own those mistakes and not be fearful about pushing your boundaries, those are very, very important skill sets. Fear is always going to be there, but man, it's like I do this thing what I call dragons. I'm slaying my dragons. So every single time something scares me, I identify that that's my dragon. I'm going to kill that sucker. So I'm going to go slay it. So every quarter, I always look for dragons to slay. So I put myself in a very uncomfortable situation, because I know the minute I find discomfort, I'm headed in the right path. And to me, that's a very, very important sort of guide to identify if you're headed in the right direction. My biggest fear is to be too comfortable, because the minute you're comfortable, it's like, you lose sight, you lose your purpose. And so I challenge everybody to just kind of find your dragons, slay your dragons. It's going to make your life so much more exciting, number one. But man, you don't realize like how far you get just because you start to reframe that thought, that idea of fear becoming this challenge.
And not only that too, it starts to become easier as you start doing more challenging things. That the next thing is just not that. Like we all have these buildups
That's
in
right.
the head of like, this is just like, oh my God, it's so much. I don't know if I can do it. And then you do it and you're like, well, that was it. And then you start doing this bigger thing and this bigger challenge. And I love the way you put into perspective, right? Like slay your dragons. I never thought about it that way, because it's just like, what's the next big thing that you can do that's going to make you uncomfortable to grow? And every time you overcome that, you just become a different person. It's natural, even without the intention of coming in and saying, hey, I need to do this to get better. It's just going to happen. It's the natural flow of things as you do something more challenging or more difficult, or something that's out of your comfort zone. It's just a natural reoccurrence that happens after you overcome it. Either you overcome it in a positive way or a negative way, but you become a different person regardless of it once you get past it. So
That's right.
I love the perspective that you put on that. I'm really happy that you're on this podcast talking about this stuff, because everything you're saying, number one, takes a ton of courage, and even just the speaking out of it is making you a different person as well, right? And who knows who you're going to reach with the stuff that you're talking about, and who knows the type of well, I guess reach is what I'm trying to get at, the type of reach that you're going to get to people, and the effect that it's going to have on certain people out there, because there's people that need to listen that are scared to even talk about it or even hear it, and they're like, man, if this person's willing to talk about this, they might get some courage, and they might want to face their fears, and they might want to get other people involved. And it's like a web effect, right? It starts to go out in different things. So
that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have facades, right? Like, there's the real you that you think it's you. And then there's this is you that you think people think of, right? And a lot of us try to protect that facade, And so I realized, like, you know what? I'm just going to be open, be honest, be vulnerable. Because at the end of the day, I don't want that facade to be dictating my direction. And a lot of the fears that we have is because we're trying to protect that facade.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, man, like I challenge everybody just to find those fears and just go through it, man. Because you can level up so quick once you're able to realize how to really conquer those fears and slay those dragons.
Yeah, that's totally true. I think, my mentor, one of your friends, Daniel, he says, do harder, better. Like he talks about that all the time. Like when things are super hard, you just get better at doing the hard things. Like it just becomes very natural. And right now we just talked about, there's this Japanese proverb where it's like, there's three sides of people. The first one, I'm trying to remember exactly what it is. The first one is how you portray yourself to the world, how your friends and family view you. And the third one is how you view yourself, or the things that you don't even like actually internalize, that you don't even speak about. So like there's three faces to every single person. And it's kind of like you're showing yourself, you're revealing that third person that normally most people don't even like look inside to even find. So that's cool, man. I think this is a good trajectory for you in your life and all the work that you've done. And speaking of pivoting, I think that COVID, and we talked about this when we were at your house, the property over in Seal Beach that we looked at
Right.
a year ago. COVID really opened the door. You mentioned this. You're like, if COVID didn't happen, I probably would have still been in the same spot, doing the same thing, moving the same path. Like you had mentioned that during the conversation. It was kind of something I thought about. And so many people during COVID looked at it as like, oh my God, this is a detrimental thing. But for you, you were able to like look at things from a bird's eye view and say like, I see where I'm at. Now I need to kind of pivot into real estate. And I'm going to go all in on it. So, like, was there a defining moment in that time? You know, how many units did you have? Were you already, because you said you were building your portfolio already and you were offsetting your W-2 income. So were you kind of like full on just like, okay, I can live off the cash that I have now. I have this secondary business that's operating. Am I just going to go full in on real estate? Like, was there like a defining moment where you just decided like, I'm doing this now?
Well, the defining moment for me was really, just the fact that it's a new inviting challenge. So I've always kind of chased after what's the next thing to do for me. What is the next thing that's going to excite me? So, real estate has always been there. I just knew at the time, like, you know what, I'm dropping my other business so I can fully concentrate on this. I just made it fun. I think at the end of the day, I'm looking for purpose. I'm a very purpose-driven person. I'm very goal-oriented. So I'm always constantly pivoting. It just so happens like, flipping that house taught me so much. Flipping that house made me realize I don't have to keep everything if the numbers don't work. So you asked me about unit counts. Honestly, I don't even keep track of that because I don't believe in counting units. I believe in making sure I have quality deals and make sure that they're the right deals. 200 units may be equivalent to like 30 or 40 units out here. So yeah. I don't really count units, man. I look at my return on equity or look at my cash flow. So I mean, I can say that I don't have to work at this point, but man, what am I going to do? I'm going to be bored up my ass, man. So honestly, it's like, I like the word job optional because I just love choosing what I want to do and doing what I want to do and when I want to do it.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And that's the other thing I want to talk about too, because a lot of your deals are in California. You're buying in SoCal, right? A lot of stuff.
Majority of what I have is in SoCal. I mean, I do have a couple apartments out of state, but quite frankly, I mean, there's some challenges there too, just because it's out of state. And I have a fairly unfair advantage here compared to anybody else, operating here because I have my own team, and I've been doing this a while and I know the area, so it's always easier to operate in your backyard. Eliminates a lot of little issues, right? Because going out of state, you have maybe cash flow might be better, but man, you got some challenges, man. Sometimes I sleep easier when I'm operating here because I've got a team and I have more control. But not to say I won't stop investing out of state because I still have a couple of apartments there. I actually just invested in an RV campground in North Carolina. That's a 470 pad RV campground. It's worth about $22 million. So, I have a few partners out there for that. But, I'm not going to stop investing out of state. It just needs to make sense.
Yeah. And the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of investors are like, why would you invest in California? It's so expensive, taxes, yada, yada, yada. And I'm just like, I'm like you. I like to invest in my backyard where I know things already. And you're different because you have a team. You're doing flips. You're doing a lot of holds now, right? You're not flipping necessarily anymore.
I've actually never flipped before. Like I've done flip. Like I will say no. I take that back. I will flip, but I don't flip to flip. I flip because it's part of my bigger strategy.
Gotcha.
So I don't know how many lenders are listening to this, but I mean, part of what I do is I flip to leverage my financial structure, my financing leverage, right? So I get 90% leverage on all my hard money lenders, and because I'm operating in a higher level, in order for me to really qualify for that, you have to be able to liquidate a certain amount of you have to be able to turn a certain amount of flips every couple of years. And so I'm trying to meet that minimum threshold just so I can really be able to still get the best leverage I can get. So it's just really part of the bigger game for me. But I'm more of a long-term investor. I love long-term buy and hold. In fact, it hurts me every time I try to liquidate something. You know, I'm always thinking like, man, I should have kept that. How could I have kept that? You know,
I
so
say
it
that
always,
too.
yeah. So it's always been hard. But at the same time, 90% leverage at like 9% interest, man. Yeah, that's hard to let go. So I got to be able to just keep maintaining that. And there's always a deal. I'm always going to be able to find a deal. I just started my own acquisition team too. So, I'm finding more and more deals now. So it makes it easier. I just got to keep the eye on the ball.
I wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of that Seal Beach property. I love that place.
I know, man.
Yeah, that place is cool.
But you know what? Look, I 1031 exchanged that into
Yeah.
the RV campground. So,
Oh yeah.
That's cool.
I didn't really lose much on there. Although,
You went bigger.
yeah, I went bigger. So I was able
Yeah.
to leverage that.
Yeah, and that was a cool place. Just so everybody gets context, Seal Beach is like what is it? Right by Long Beach, between Long Beach and what is it? Newport, kind of like right in the middle, right there.
Yeah,
I think it's Huntington.
Huntington, and Long Beach, but it's a nice little pocket. A lot of retired people out there, so there's some opportunities there. But it's also very, very, very clean, and I feel like it's a hidden gem. I'd like to own more properties out there on one time, but I'm waiting for the Airbnb rules to kind of loosen up over there. So, plan a little bit better.
I think Rafa actually got that place listed. Rafa, what happened with that again? He had a booking inquiry for like 22 grand or something. I forget what it was. Rafa kind of looked at it.
It's like 20 grand a month or something like that, right? And you had some interest.
Yeah, it was a $28,000 booking for a month. I remember I was like, "That's crazy." Why would yeah, it was nice, but it was a big property, big luxury property. That's why as well. Plus, it was close to the water.
It was a cool place. So, how are you leveraging the financial side of this? Like, are you picking up partners now? You mentioned this earlier because I was like you for a long time. Like, I've been doing a lot of DIY, like doing it myself kind of things, and now I realize like I have to have partners in order to kind of grow in this space. So how did you? How are you doing your deals now? Are you partnering with people? Are you splitting equity? Are you kind of like what does that look like? How do you
quite honestly, I'm still trying to work that out. I'm trying different strategies here and there. So I'm still I'm still self-financed. But some of the flip properties I'm looking for, I got investors in for gap funding. So I'm structuring it where they put in the down payment and I give them, interest on their money. So, testing that out. But I think the plan is by the end of the year, I'm also going to start a fund for the ADU strategies and SB9 strategies that I have going on. So I'm just trying to build momentum with my acquisition team just so I can get enough. And also I have so many projects right now, like we're at capacity construction wise. So we're trying to stabilize all that. But I think once all of that is stabilized, I think I'm probably going to open up this fund. And, there's so much uncertainty with financing right now. Yeah. So I just want to have a backup plan as well. But, if the interest rate starts to drop, man, I think things are going to be easier. But I still leverage a lot of hard money. I have a lot of good relationship with brokers and non-QM type loans. And so lenders is something I leverage a lot. And I might just get some additional investors just for the gap. Equity wise, I'm not really sure yet how the split's going to be, but I think if I do the fund structure, that's a little bit easier to manage.
Yeah. Fund structure would be significantly easier to manage depending on what you're going to use it for and how you're going to structure it.
Yep.
What are your, that was actually going to be my next question. In terms of the way you're going into this fund, have you thought anything about it? Like any actual details behind it, or is it just something that's kind of lingering in your mind for the future?
No, I mean, we're in planning stage. In fact, I'm supposed to be, I do have a partner. My partner is Robert Chuang. So he's my development partner. So he and I are basically 50-50 and everything. So, and so we have a meeting in the next month or so just to really put together a strategy and how to really structure this. But I do have a list of investors already kind of waiting in the sideline. In fact, they're like, "Hey, Alvin, what's the next deal?" Yeah. So So if you guys know any other investor I can put on that list, let me know. But there are definitely opportunities we're looking at right now. There's a couple opportunities that I just kind of fell on my lap recently. We're looking at it. It's a single family that might be, this is a bigger development, and we might be able to turn into 17 units. So, little things like that. That's kind of outside of the normal scope that we're looking for. But man, opportunity comes, you got to look at it, right?
Yep.
I haven't even pitched that to any of my investors yet, but we'll see how it goes.
Well, you also in very good groups too. That in the groups that you're surrounding yourself with, you can always just announce it to those people. Like even in your GoBundance masterminds, right? Like,
yeah, my thought is that like when you have the right deals, you have the right opportunity. Money's easy to find. It's really the issue might even become about like, do I want this partner or not?
Yeah.
Which is and really it's like I haven't really quite focused on the funding route yet. I'm still building the acquisition team, trying to build momentum, and also making sure that we have the right infrastructure to be able to accommodate. Because man, once I start that fund, that's like a fire hose. I got to keep that thing moving. I got to keep that money moving. So honestly, that's kind of where I see the bottleneck is like, I just want to make sure I have the right deal flows in place.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. So right now, Alvin, are you adding? So for those people that don't know, SB9 is a rule that passed in California where you can have, and you could probably have a little more context to this. I don't necessarily know the whole thing, but you can add an accessory dwelling unit, which is an ADU, a junior ADU, and you can sublet. Is it 2 units on top of that? So essentially, if you have a big enough lot line, you can actually split lot lines within the property. Do you want to kind of break that down, what you're doing with the SB9 stuff?
Yeah, you know what? Let me start with the ADUs because the ADUs started first. ADUs, you're allowed to have a second unit on your property by way of what's called accessory dwelling units. Those can anywhere be a conversion to a garage conversion. You can add a detached or attached additional new construction unit if you want. And also they have something called junior ADUs, which is basically carving out up to 500 square feet of your existing property and turning that into another unit. Now, the biggest drawback here, at least in California, is with these current ADUs, the actual living square footage does not count with this ADUs with the ADUs and junior ADUs. So there's some issues with appraisal values, especially if there's not enough comps, right? Yeah. So it depends on the city and local municipalities too. Sometimes there's limitation on how many things you can build, right? And so they're trying to come up with other ideas on how to build more units. So they came up with the SB9, and SB9 is a little bit different. So you can still put ADUs on all these properties, but the big difference is that with an SB9, you are now legally able to add a legitimate second unit. In other words, you can now legally create a duplex, not just an accessory dwelling. Yeah. So once you actually have 2 units, it becomes part of what's called, really technically it's multifamily. And so because it's a multifamily, by right, you should be able to add additional 2 ADUs. So now you can go from 1 unit to 4 units. Now, there is a kind of a misconception that with SB9, you always have to do a lot split, which you actually don't need to do that.
You don't.
But with an SB9, you can actually split the lot and sell that second half with the separate SB9 unit in it, which is basically the duplex side. You can sell that separately if you wanted to. So it's just an option that you can partake in. Now, I don't like doing a lot split for few reasons. One reason is it takes a long time to do a lot split. That's a whole different permitting and planning altogether. That could take some time. Number 2, when you do a lot split, as of right now, there's an owner occupancy requirement. So one of the remaining units needs to be owner occupied, which as an investor doesn't make sense. So I'm staying away from that until there's a Senate bill that they're trying to pass, which hopefully eliminates owner occupancy requirements. Until that's passed, I'm not pursuing junior ADUs, because that's another thing that requires owner occupancy, and the lot splits. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, I hope that does pass, because I think that a lot of people in California right now would actually use that. I mean, a lot of investors are the ones that are actually building ADUs now, before, and Rafa and I have talked about this on the show before, and like Los Angeles and more of those condensed areas, like people have been building ADUs. In fact, like Hispanic people started building these back in the 70s to bring their families and stuff in. And they were not permitted. They're not permitted or anything. So now, if that bill does pass, and hopefully you can give us the name, and I'll go and make sure we vote on that. That will pass, so you can eventually sell. And not only that, but investors don't have to live on the property. There's all kinds of real estate laws that are passing right now. And we know about the short-term rental, potential for that next added 15% tax, which,
oh gosh,
you know what, you guys, I feel like, I don't know how I feel about that. I really don't. Like, I feel, I understand it, but I'm also just like, man, like, are you serious? Like, isn't the government supposed to pay for that? Like, why are regular investors, because most people that have short-term rentals, they only have one unit. They're not these big, giant, freaking huge companies. You know what I mean? So I don't even know if we want to go down that rabbit hole. In fact, I think we had the discussion, me and Rafa, about this whole thing. Like, it looks like it's passed with 27 votes, but I don't know if it's really been signed by the governor yet. So it's not.
Even if it does pass, it's not going to come into effect until 2025. It hasn't actually passed yet.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
that gives rooms for adjustment. I mean, Rafa, maybe start raising those rates now, just to, just to accommodate, take advantage of it. But I mean, I don't even know what the reaction would be with that. One thing comes to mind is there's going to be less and less Airbnbs out there, maybe less competition, maybe more opportunity. At some point, you can raise your rates a little bit more and pass the interest, or pass the tax to the guest. I don't know.
That's what's going to happen. Yeah. So the guest would actually pay for it. It'd be a pass-through amount, just like with TOT taxes. But that's the problem there, is that you have California taxes, you have TOT taxes, you have the product management software taxes that Airbnb charges you. So just between those three things alone, you're probably looking at 40-something%. Like, how is an operator going to be able to operate and even break even doing that? Like, it's almost impossible unless you have like a crazy awesome unit. But then I think this poses like two different things. Maybe people might shift back to the Airbnb or to the hotel industry, which would be good for Rafa, right? In a lot of places, well, it doesn't have stuff in California, but then also you're right, Alvin, where these operators that were operating before now have the opportunity to get better and charge more for the stay, essentially at the end of the day. But is that going to push people from staying at a Airbnb or push them back into a hotel?
That's a question, right? Then now Airbnb isn't so much a cost-effective solution for these types of these types of accommodations. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that Airbnb is trying to fight this too. I hope.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So we'll see. I mean, I don't know, and it seems like it's only really through Airbnb, right? I mean, I don't know how they can track it if it's like your own listing. So
they can't track it.
Yeah, so there's going to be a resurgence of probably everybody having their own websites on top of outside of Airbnb. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. It's already happening.
Yeah. Well, I think the savvy investors are making that happen, but a lot of the people that are on the Airbnb site aren't following that trend, and that's a problem. Like, they're going to be left behind. It's just like the cookie cutter. Rafa and I have talked about this a billion times. The cookie cutter homes, like, those aren't necessarily going to be around anymore. And if they are, they're going to be like the budgeted homes. Like, people aren't going to stay there unless they're on a budget. The other properties are going to be, where people are going to want to stay. And so I know it's an interesting thing to think about, especially in California. Like, there's not affordable housing here, Alvin. You know that. Like, there's just not. So it's like, if you look at the pendulum, like, there's I see the pros and cons on each side, but at the end of the day, does the average consumer need to pay for that, like the average investor, or is that something that the government should have subsidized to handle these things? I feel like California is being mismanaged in a lot of ways.
I mean, one of the things that I'm thinking about this strategy, right, is like, and this is just something I was thinking about. It's like, okay, it's going to be about Airbnbs versus hotels, right? Yeah. So if you're going to be on a hotel, you have limited rooms. So maybe 1 or 2 rooms maximum, right? Before it gets too expensive, right? So I think, at least for me, the way I'm thinking is like, I'm going to keep focusing on those 3 to 4 bedrooms as Airbnbs, because, that's easier to do as opposed to these 1 to 2 bedroom, Airbnbs, which now you're competing against the hotels. So it's really just finding that, where's that balance of cost, right? Like, is it going to cost more to do 4 rooms in a hotel or 4 rooms for, 4-bedroom house that you're renting out? So, it's just really finding that delicate balance. I think I think right now it's just a power struggle between Airbnb and the powers that are be over here in freaking California. Stupid people here. But yeah, I don't want to get into that right now.
You don't want to go down politics rabbit hole.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's there. There's a lot of cities here that are being mismanaged. I mean, San Francisco is one of them, which is freaking out of control.
That place is falling apart.
I know it's really bad. And even San Diego, like when we had the summit, like Rafa, like I was driving around town, like San Diego is really bad. I was there like probably 3 years ago, and it's changed a lot in the last 3 years since I've been there. It's just a lot of homeless people. It's
oh yeah, it's bad.
A lot dirtier. There was camps. It almost looked like a mini San Francisco, a mini Oakland, driving down parts of San Diego. So, yeah, man, I'm curious to see what happens, and hopefully it's hopefully that law doesn't pass. But keep in mind, like I think that we should invest in places that have laws, or things that, so we're not having to like guess what happens. Like me, my property is just shut down in Modesto. Like we couldn't have them anymore, and I had to go fight with the city, Alvin, and it ended up being that one of the council members actually owned a bunch of hotels here. Of course, he doesn't want people to Airbnb in the market here. So always. I called them out. Like I literally went in there and I recorded this on YouTube. If you guys get a chance, go watch it. I literally go to the courthouse and I'm just like, hey, like, I know this guy has hotels here. And they're like, no, that's not the case. He's a councilman. Like he was the one that actually, and that's how politics work with, with the hotel industry. Look at Vegas. Like you can't have operations there with short-term rentals because that state is owned by the casino department. It's like literally essentially the politicians and the hotel owners are connected. Mm-hmm. So Rafa's going to have to jump in and be a lobbyist now, since you got hotels over in the Midwest out there, Rafa. So
for both sides.
So we're getting to the top of the hour right now, Rafa. Do you want to go ahead and jump into our questions?
Yeah, it's going really well. I always hear when we get to this part, but we are getting to the top here. So, Alvin, we have 3 questions that we always ask everybody here in the last 10 minutes of the show. And the first one is, being that this is the big break show, we want to know, do you have a defining moment that was your big break that got you to investing or just entrepreneurship or anything like that?
I have several. First is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. That was a big eye opener for me. Definitely changed the mindset there.
Who gave you that book, Alvin?
Do you really want to know? Okay, so what's interesting is I got into, a friend of mine when I was in college goes, hey, Alvin, you want to join this thing with me? It's like selling insurance, like the whole pyramid scheme, but they had their sales training, and like they started giving that book, and I'm like, I don't know if I want to read this book, but eventually I read it, and I'm like, instead of actually staying in that thing, I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'd rather buy real estate. That's what I picked up from that book. So that opened my eyes for that. So I got it from that, but the other thing that I wanted to mention is, the real big break really that catapulted me is when I got laid off, because that was the point in my life where like, oh crap, am I going to stay as an employee, or do I want to start my own business? And that
Are you the type of person that does well when their back is against the wall?
Oh, always, man. I like intentional traumas. Just because of just because of my past, and I was going to go back to that, is that the lessons I learned from my childhood trauma was that I can always change. I can always pivot. I can always reinvent myself. And so I've learned then that is one of the biggest superpowers I have, is like the ability to just pick up and go. And anytime I'm able to tap that energy that I have of like, life and death, survival. That survival instinct kicks in, man. Like all of a sudden, like, okay, I'm tapping into my dragon slayer. I'm gonna fight for my life here, and it's a powerful tool. And so that's one of the things that I'm very aware of. And if you guys, this is why I keep telling everybody, like, focus on your fears, challenges, fight those fights, slay those dragons, because once you're able to tap that energy, it's so much easier to do anything, and nothing is impossible after that. So that's one of the biggest lessons that I've had, is being able to pivot, and that's okay to do, is letting go of your current identity, because everybody's got their own identities at the time. But once you're able to realize, you know what, this identity right now, this is temporary. I can always do better. I can always be better. I can always be the better self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, move the needle.
Always move the needle. That's what makes life exciting, guys.
Yeah. Did you get that mindset? Like, did you always have that, or was that because Go Bros talk about that often? Is that like, was that something you kind of always had, or did Go Abundance kind of give you that thought process, or was that already in you?
It wasn't always in me, but I do remember it as a kid. Being like, especially with my traumas here, I needed to grow up fast. I basically raised my siblings. My parents worked. My dad worked graveyard shift, and my mom worked in the day, so I had to take care of my brothers. So for me, it's all about being self-reliant. And then also, when I used to compete, man, it's just my competitive nature. I realized, like, I gotta always be competitive. So I've always challenged myself to be better and to be better at everything. And so, I wouldn't say it's nature versus nurture. It hasn't always been there, but I knew that I had to change the way I look at things.
Got you. Did you always have that, like, did you know as a kid that you were going to do something great? Did you have something in you that was like, I know I'm going to do something that it's going to be meaningful in my life? Like, did you always have that thought process?
Honestly, man, before, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew oh, what's next? What's going on? There's always something that happens in life where oh, I got to improve on this, but I've always been open to it. I've always been, open to seeing things. I'm always looking for opportunity in invest in stuff, opportunity to just change directions, and opportunity to just improve. So I think once you're open to the idea of change, things just happen. Things just happen. It's gonna self-propel you.
Yeah, I totally agree. What advice would you give for people right now, listening to this? This is part of the segment too, is like a learn and apply. So what advice would you give to somebody? And you kind of said it a second ago, is kind of face your fears, but what advice would you give somebody listening to this right now? What can they do? What's a step they can take to either better their life, make harder easier, stuff like that? What would be your advice on that?
Oh man, that's a loaded question, man. I mean, quite honestly, deep down, it's really just challenging yourself. I mean, it really boils down to that, right? Face your fears. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. When it comes to investments, just try, just do. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Failure doesn't mean it's the end of the road. Failure just means that's a stepping stone. It's just a lesson to do better and not make the same mistakes. Now, if you make the same mistakes 2 or 3 times, then you're doing something wrong, but I can guarantee you, I'm actually, I don't mind making mistakes. I look at it as an opportunity to learn. I'm a college dropout. So the way I look at it is, you know what? I didn't have all these college tuitions that I still have to pay for. I don't have a college loan. So I'm I have credit now. So I could afford a mistake. I tap into that fictitious, college fund that I never had to pay for. I'm you know what? All right, I'm going to dip into this fund. I couldn't afford a little loss, and it's always sort of propelled me.
Yeah, you know what's crazy? I was on a call with my pod this morning, and that's my GoBro pod, and
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you just said right now. There's a guy that just bought it's his first time doing a large build himself. He's doing like a commercial unit on bottom, multi-use, 22 units up on top, and he's like, I can go ahead and mess up here because I have the room for it. And he's like, I'm expecting to do that, and I'm just sitting there thinking, like, dude, this is going to be a $22 million thing, and he's expecting to mess up. He's like, this is my first one. I'm going to mess up. Like, I already know it. And that's something that you see with these very successful people, that they're open to failures. They're open to the idea of like, actually not even open to like, I know I'm going to fail to some degree to a certain point, but then that's going to be a stepping stone to the next part and maybe do the next one better and have an idea on how to do this. And granted, he does have a lot of people around him that give him his ideas. And even though he's still like, I'm still going to fail at something. And this is part of the process.
Yeah, I don't think it's part of. I don't think it's something that they know or that they're open to. It's just they know it's going to happen based on the success that they've had, because they didn't get to the success that they had without making mistakes along the way. And with success comes mistakes, right? But the successful people on top have taken those mistakes and turned them into a successful outcome. Because if you make a mistake and then you go, oh man, that sucks, I'm never doing this again, and you stay where you're at because now you're scared to do something better, you're never going to become that successful person. And these uberly successful people have already been through all of those mistakes where they go, okay, cool, what did I learn from that, and how can I apply it so that it doesn't happen again, so that I can be better the next time?
Yeah, exactly.
And so with this guy being at that level, he knows, okay, I'm going to screw this up once or twice, but I'm going to make sure it never happens again, so that the bigger deal next time gets better. So it's not something that they're open to. They just know that it's part of the outcome.
Yeah, and the key to this too is like, the more mistakes you made in your past, right? The more confident you are, because at some point your mind switches to, hey, how do I solve this? You become much more resourceful. So next time a mistake happens, like you're already thinking ahead. In fact, you're able to react so much quicker because it's no longer emotional. It becomes more tactical. And I think going back to what Rafa said before is like, if you're not used to challenging yourself and tackling those fears and making those mistakes, you don't have that exercise yet. You haven't exercised that muscle of being of reaction by way of tactical reaction as opposed to emotional reaction. So you look at it as an opportunity to practice, to be able to just do that. And man, when you accept the idea that you could make mistakes and it's okay, dude, all of a sudden you're doing stuff you've never done before. You're challenging yourself.
You don't even realize that it becomes second nature.
Yeah, it becomes second nature.
That's what holds so many people back, Alvin. Like, that's what holds people back, is that idea of some type of failure. Like 99% of the time, it's that one idea of something hasn't even happened yet.
Yeah.
But again, it's like a mindset thing. And that's the thing that I think as you get involved in this, like I have friends that are like, I want them to be doing more things, and their brain is always like, no, but what if this happens, or what if that happens? And it's like you have to figure out how to.
There's always that what ifs. Yeah, they got it. The biggest thing too is I think they got to figure out like, okay, if that happens, what's the worst outcome that's going to happen? Well, well, you maybe lost some money. Okay, but now you learn how not to lose that money again, right? And so, I think
but most people don't have that mindset.
Yeah, well, it goes. It's a growth mindset. It comes.
And I think that's the challenge. Is like, how do you get people to think in a different way? And essentially, you can't. Like, they have to be the ones to come. You can you can arm somebody with all the ideas, the blueprint on how to do anything, and they have to want to do it at the end of the day.
I mean,
well, it's not for everybody too. That's why we're called entrepreneurs, right?
I mean, it is and it isn't. Okay, so here's the key to that, right? It's really surrounding yourself with people who are thinking the same, right? Because you are the average of the 5 people you hang out with. You guys heard of that term, right? So all of a sudden, those extraordinary moves are normalized within that space. All of a sudden, you're like, holy shit, oops, did I just say a bad word there? Sorry, you can bleep that out.
No, you're good.
But like all of a sudden, to the naked eye of people who aren't exposed to it, they're like, man, you're doing crazy stuff, Alvin. But man, I'm in GoBundance. What I'm doing isn't crazy at all. In fact, I'm the least craziest in my pods. So it's like, it's normalized to a point where like, oh, you know what? You guys are doing big stuff. Wow, I can do big stuff too. And this is nothing compared to what you guys are doing. And you just mentioned that guy who was like, taking this $20 million, development, potential risk. That sounds scary to me, so, but I do know a bunch of guys in GoBundance are like that, and that's normalized, right? So, to your point, guys, like, people who are outside, they're not ready for it because they don't know. And so it's quite important to make sure you surround yourself with peers who are doing the big things, because, you know, it becomes, that craziness becomes normal.
Normal.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but these
Part of the other
podcasts,
conversation.
I mean, yeah, these podcasts bring people into the room, even though they're not necessarily here. It still puts you in the same mindset. I think that's the most important thing. Like, you know, just having that mindset that's starting to kind of shift in that other direction. And it starts somewhere, and it could be simple as, I mean, that's me starting with investing. Rafa too probably listened to, you know, Bigger Pockets in 2015, 2016, and started thinking about investing. I mean, it starts somewhere.
That's right.
I read Rich Dad Poor Dad in 2015, which is what got me into it. I was like, all right, this is me. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, and now I know where I want to go. And I've always wanted to get into real estate, and that just literally was just like that opening the door that goes, okay, Rafa, this is it. Walk through the door, and this is what you're going to do.
That's right.
Anyway, with that being said, Alvin, I want to know, what's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received. All right, this sounds a little weird and sci-fi, but you know, my boss at that agency, one day we were having lunch, and he goes, Alvin, you know, if you really want to do really well in business, you have to be multidimensional. And at the time, I'm like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Right?
Star Trek.
And I'm like, what does that mean? Is this guy an alien? You know, but my mind started thinking about it, and I asked him, what do you mean by that? He goes, well, that's for you to figure out. So he just left me with this challenge throughout my life. But what I've identified about that is diversify. Think outside of the box. Be more than who you are now. Extend yourself. Push your limits. And be multi-dimensional in that sense. So I started thinking about everything in that pattern, man, like investing. That's why I'm all about diversification. I've always challenged myself in terms of who do I want to be now? What's the next identity for myself? You know, I love that. I was the martial artist. I was the designer. I was the creative director. I was the business owner. I'm real estate investor. Now I'm a developer. What's my next thing? You know, now I'm all about like giving back to the world. You know, now I'm being a mentor. What's next? You know, so it's really just being multidimensional in so many facets. If you start thinking about that, man, the world opens up for you.
You know, the way I look at it, and that's great. I absolutely love that, because the way I look at it is, everybody talking about this whole episode, talking about you being able to reinvent yourself every single time. That's what being multidimensional means to me. You don't have to be one person your entire life, right? And if you think about it, like if you, all these movies, like even the new Spider-Man movie at the multiverse, there's a million different versions of Spider-Man, in that everything everywhere all at once, right? There's 100,000 versions of this one lady in this movie. Same concept in real life. Your life in direction can go in your life can go in any direction that you point it towards, right? I can become Rafa, the real estate investors. I can become Rafa, the salsa dancer. I can become Rafa, the artist. I can become Rafa, the painter. I can become Rafa, the skateboarder. I can become Rafa, the snowboarder. Like, you don't have to be stuck as Rafa, the guy who does short-term rentals his entire life. Same thing with you, Alvin, right? You've done the martial artist thing, right? The toy designer, the set designer, the movie sets, the real estate investing, the house flipping. Now you're getting into larger deals. You're getting into short-term rental. You don't have to be stuck in one thing. It's not just you being that one person your entire life until you die. And most people get stuck in this one lane their entire life. Oh, well, I got to be here because it's that guaranteed paycheck every month. I got to be here because it's that comfort in life. No, dude, listen, you can be anybody you want to be at any moment in time that you want to do it. All it takes is a little bit of action. You want to learn how to sculpt, get up and grab some clay. You want to learn how to ride a skateboard, go buy a skateboard. You know what I mean? It's not, I can never do that because I don't know how to do it. Well, go do something that will get you to be that person. That's what being multidimensional to me means. And you explained it perfectly throughout this entire episode about how you're always reinventing yourself because you're not scared to do something new.
And not only
that's great advice, man.
Not only that, but you're still like waving bye to the former person that you were to the person you're becoming. You know, like that's what I like about what you've said in this episode, and which I think it's gonna translate to a lot of different people. But I also want to see Rafa as a salsa dancer. I'm sure you do too, Alvin. Like,
I'm trying to find some salsa classes right now with my girlfriend. I've been telling her for like 2 months. I was like, "Yo, what's up? Let's go dance."
Dude, I want to see that, man.
That's funny.
Please do that.
Dancing salsa, bro.
Well, there it is, folks. Alvin from the Philippines to the U.S. Grew up.
Future salsa dancer.
He punched some people in the face as he got older. He took some jujitsu, started getting into real estate, got into the movie sets. Like, you've done it all, man. You've done it all. This is probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite episode that we've ever had. There's a lot of
thank you.
quality stuff here, man. So, Alvin, you just took that prize, buddy.
Yeah, it was really good. Usually I'm asking a bunch of questions, Alvin, and today I stayed quiet because Jesse was on point with them, and you were just like on fire, dude. I was like, there's no need for me to talk or interrupt. You were just going one after the other. So it was really good. I'm glad you came on.
Thank you.
Yeah, Rafa actually, as we were discussing, Rafa sent me some flip off emojis because I was asking so many questions. So
Well, hey, look, just to clear the air here, okay? Rafa's been asking me to on this podcast, and I said, "Well, man, I don't know. I'm a little nervous. I'm like anti, going in podcast." And then just asked me, and it's like, "Okay, I'm on." And Rafa's like, "What the hell, man?" No. So just to clear the air, look. Last year you asked me, but I wasn't ready to be in any podcast just because I'm like the guy who's like always behind the scenes. I like to be that stealth wealth guy. But this year I promised myself, look, you know what? I can create a bigger impact if I'm actually out there more. And so I think you and I had this conversation, Rafa, of like, man, you said it that day. I'm like, you know what? I mean, you're the fifth person that month that said that. Like, be out there more, do more things. You have so much in your head to be able to, you have so much knowledge and experience and just be able to inspire people that you should be out there more. So I took your advice, Rafa. So I'm really giving you more credit.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate
and you did the 728 show, which that was good. That was good.
Yeah. The 728 was actually the start of this whole thing. When I did that, I'm like, that sort of pointed me in this new direction, this new identity that I'm doing. And in fact, like, because of that, I'm more on social media, man. I was very resistant to doing that. And I see you on social media. I'm like, damn, just is killing ass here.
Speaking of social media, where can folks find you, Alvin? Like, where can people get a hold of you?
So I'm doing Instagram. So I'm at Alvinized, ALVINIZED. And I'm also on Facebook. You guys can find me there.
You got to get a YouTube channel going too, man, of your projects and stuff. Okay. I'll put that on my list. Because I think it's a cool thing to do. Like, I mean, I think the way that the marketing, and I think this is what's worked for me, is that I put long form content on, then I'll put little clips out, and then I want people to go watch my YouTube stuff. So at this end of the day, they're watching your long form stuff because that's where you're actually really giving value to people. The short stuff is like, people are going to forget that anyway, right? So I don't know, man. I think the long form stuff is good.
I got to take my cues from you, man. You're going to have to teach me how to do that. You got this all mastered. So
I have no idea what I'm doing, Alvin. I have no idea. I'll be the first one to admit, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. Anybody that thinks that I know what I'm doing, like, that's the other thing too. Rafa and I talk about this all the time. Like, gurus are always out there like, oh, we know everything. I'm like, no, you don't. Like, nobody knows what they're doing. Like, they're just trying to figure it out. That's the truth.
Yeah. Everybody's figuring it out as they go.
And that's the secret of it all, right? No one knows what they're doing, right? And everybody thinks, oh, I don't want to do that because those guys already know what they're doing. I don't know half the stuff I do, man. I don't know half the stuff I do.
Yeah, but you figure it out.
Figure it out. That's the name of the game, figuring it out.
Exactly. Awesome, man. Alvin, I appreciate you, man. This has been awesome. Rafa, as always, this is great, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for coming on, man. It means a lot.
Yeah, this was fun. Appreciate it.